Welcome back to this follow-on tutorial to highlight the functionality that you can get out of Blender cheat sheets. So by now I'm going to save you the blah 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 and go into End Panel and do a small little recap on object mode, which was in the last tutorial, before we get into edit mode. So a couple of things have been fixed since then. The first is now when you apply selected transforms, you can apply to location, rotation, and scale. So if I grab this and then I rotate it and then I scale it and I want to lock it because that's the final result I want, I can hit that global button and it'll apply all three. So if I try to now reset, basically that reset should not take effect because I've applied the transforms that I wanted to have. But now, just going to undo this quickly, and this is now the stage just before I apply location, rotation, scale. If I now hit reset, what should happen is that reset should undo location, rotation, and scale. This small update, what I've also added is the apply location button separately from all the rest, and also reset location button. So for instance, if I grab this and I move it away, I can reset the location. If I grab it and move it away, apply location, then try to reset it, nothing should happen. Right, then also just a bit of an update on some of the broken functionality that's been fixed. I haven't yet addressed the drag object along floor. That's going to take a while. But what I have done is I have fixed the subdivision modifier. In the previous one, I was getting the same mesh division on each button, and there was a syntax error in the code. So basically now there's a low resolution poly, medium, and higher. So this now works pretty much bulletproof. And if you go under modifiers, you can simply use these to load it in very quickly without navigating through a menu, which is quite useful to have. Right, let's close down this section, and we're going to now go into edit mode, which is going to be quite a beefy section. What I've done is I've re-included the motif again, like you see at the start of the add-on. This is specifically for newbies to drive home the importance of object mode and edit mode, and when these buttons become available. You'll notice that if I select an object and go into edit mode, suddenly all 6 of these core functionality buttons become active. You can still move, rotate, and scale, but you can also now select a vertice, you can select an edge, or you can select a face. And it's just really useful to have the actual label in front of you. So it's important to remember that when you are in edit mode specifically, you can still move a face, an edge, or a vertice. You can rotate, and you can still scale. You're not going to want to use these shortcut keys while hovering over the end panel because you're not going to get quite the desired result. It's best to always just use the shortcut key that you see there and bring your mouse over the object and apply what you want to apply. The next part is edit mode has got the ability to hide and reveal, pretty much the same as object mode. So I can hide a single face, and it's still there, just that you won't see it in the scene collection, but you can reveal it if you need to. This, for instance, is useful when you want to be modeling on the inside of an object. So let's say, for instance, I'm doing something on the inside of that object and I can't see what I'm working on. Then I can hide a face selectively so I can open up that object and have a look inside and do my modeling. That's quite useful. Now another one, let me see how to do this one. I'm going to quickly tab out. I'm going to add a subdivision modifier, and I'm going to now in edit mode add shade smooth. Now in object mode there's shade smooth per object, But in edit mode, there's also shade smooth. So basically what I should be getting, let me see if I can I hide that outside box. Yeah, there we go. Shade smooth is going to show you basically similar to the object mode shade smooth, but technically this should just be for the object that you are working on. Okay, so basically shade smooth and shade flat is very similar to the way that you'd use your shade smooth and shade flat in object mode. Right, let me undo this and now come back to our cube. I'm still going to be in edit mode. While I'm in edit mode, if I go into vertices select and I choose one of these vertices, but I want to select them all, I can select all vertices or select none. And this is now a toggle. So you don't have to have a separate shortcut key for this. If I've selected one vertice and I want to select everything else instead, I want to invert my selection, I can basically click on select opposite. If I want to grow my selection, now this is best way for me to show you this is I want to select A, right click, and when I hit S, although you see my mouse staying here, that's not the button that I am pressing. This mouse can be anywhere in this menu as long as I hit the key or the letter that is underlined. So I can be down here, and as long as I hit S, I'm going to be subdividing. I know this is a little bit unintuitive because you're expecting that that's what I'm clicking, but that is not what I am clicking. I'm hitting the S key to subdivide. So I'm going to right-click, subdivide, and why I want to show you this is because this gives you a very clear example of how grow selection and shrink selection works. Let's change into face mode and then select these 4 faces, and now we're going to grow selection. And grow selection should basically increase that selection to include the adjacent faces. That's pretty self-explanatory and very useful for certain things. I can also shrink it, bring it back down. So these are now paired alongside each other. What you'd normally have is Control plus and Control minus, and it's a very fast way to get a selection that you want. Let's say, for instance, I want to grab it along the x-axis. I can then very quickly do a modification like that. Now the other one is select linked. Okay, this next button is quite simple to understand. If I have got a mesh and I click anywhere on that mesh and I want to see what faces, edges and vertices are attached to that specific face, edge or vertice that I'm working with, I can click select linked. Now because this object is basically let me just re-enable my mouse look because I've got a faulty mouse wheel right now. If I click select linked, every single face should highlight on this object. So let's see. Yes, indeed. If something on this object was separated from it, so for instance, I'll give you a small little example. I'm going to parent that away. So now it looks like everything's still one object. But if I come into this now and I tab in and I select, let's say for instance, just one of these faces. Oops, I'm in object mode. Got to watch out for that. And I click on select link. You'll see that it'll highlight everything except that what was parented away. Sometimes you're going to find with meshes that there are multiple separate meshes inside of the same object that you're working in edit mode, and you can't see what part of a mesh is attached to another part of a mesh, like for instance if you're working on a character. So tap on to the mesh, press L or select linked, and it'll show you exactly that piece of mesh that is continuously connected. In the next section, editing tools, we're going to go through some subsections such as cleanup, dissolve, duplication, edge tools, extrude, face tools, knife, split and separate, and transform. In cleanup, I can't really show you beautify faces because I don't have a dirty mesh. So I'm going to leave some of this for you to discover for yourself, but I'll show you the ones that I can show you just with this rudimentary example. A couple of these examples here, I'm just going to give a verbal description of. Delete loose geometry. Many times when you're doing advanced modeling, you might have multiple vertices at the same point because you are combining meshes. You also might have duplicate edges. Sometimes you've even got duplicate faces. And so delete loose geometry provides you a way to clean up your mesh as long as your geometry, whether it be vertices, edges, or faces, is explicitly overlapping each other. Merge vertices is quite simple to understand. If I split this off, usually the way that I would do this is I would select the first one, select the last one, press M, and I'm going to go merge at first. Now they are joined together. I can also do this another way, merge vertices, and the same menu will hop up. I chose this vertice first, that one last, so I want to make sure that I click on at first. But I could do it another way. I could go at center. Now imagine there's a line between these two vertices and smack bang in the middle. That would be where center is. And you see now there's a very subtle offset. It finds the distance between the two and merges it at that point. And so you'll notice that there are a number of other ways for you to merge. I'm going to undo this quickly, and now that should be one vertice again. Now, tries to quads. A very simple way that I can show you this is, let's go with the knife tool, K. I'm going to just draw a couple of edges, press enter, and select everything. Now technically what should happen is if I've selected a whole mesh and that entire mesh is in tries, it's not bulletproof. It gets very close to the final result of converting everything to quads. But now if I tap on tries to quads, all triangles or diagonals should be removed. It is, I would say, with the characters that I've done mesh cleanup on, it's about 98% effective. It doesn't do it perfectly. The rest is a bit of manual cleanup, which is quite tedious. You've got to slow yourself down, drink a good couple of numbers of cups of coffee, and pull up your own reins because you got mesh cleaning to do. Kind of treat mesh cleaning as therapy because it really slows you down and it pulls you into the zone. The next one is remove duplicates. I'm going to try to show you what this means. If I shift D and escape, there's now two surfaces that you can't see that there are two. It looks like there are only one, but they're still part of the same mesh. So if I go A to select everything and remove duplicates, technically what should happen is that that duplicate that is now there should be gone. So let's see if we can find it. This might not be a bulletproof way to do it. Okay, that's a good sign. Let me come in from inside of the object and see if I can select it from underneath. And G again. Okay, it looks like that duplicate was removed. And that should hold true for faces, edges, and for vertices. Right, the next is dissolve vertices, edges, and faces, which you can hit the X key and get the same sort of menu. I'll give you a quick rundown on this. Let's start with faces first. If I dissolve a face, it should remove that specific face. It hasn't. So sometimes I find that dissolving doesn't quite work. So the way that I force that is I go over the object with my mouse, press the X key, and instead of dissolve face, I delete the face. that is the one workaround that I've found. I'm still learning a little bit about what the dissolve means. I don't really know the difference between dissolve face and delete face because it's basically just meant to delete it anyway. But I'm just giving you a quick run through on this. If I dissolve an edge, let me rather just go into edge mode, select one edge, and then dissolve an edge. You'll notice that it dissolves that edge even though the face is still there. If I, instead of clicking the button, I come over the actual edge and I press the X key and I dissolve an edge. This is quite useful for when you want to clean up a mesh. For instance, like I showed you a little bit earlier on, if we've got an edge that's causing a triangle and I want to clean up my mesh a little bit, I go to number 2 for edge mode, select that edge, X, dissolve edge. Sometimes edges won't dissolve, and when they're really stubborn, just hit the X key and delete the edge. But you can now see you get a different result. I don't have this fully consistent yet, but generally you want to try dissolve edge first because you want to keep the face that is part of the mesh. Limited dissolve, I'm going to skip on that because I don't use this. I've just included it for future functionality, so we'll be exploring that in another tutorial. Duplicate is basically, let's go the most simplest example, go into face mode and Shift D, and you can see that I've duplicated that face. I should also be able to do the same thing if I go to number 2 for edge select, Shift D, there I've duplicated an edge. If I go into vertice mode and I select a vertice, Shift D, there I've duplicated a vertice. So now you see all 3 examples in one go. Let's undo that. And let's just check that everything's still there. I'm going to press L to see if everything is still linked. It is. Okay. So now, bevel edges. Bevel edges you're going to have some frustrating time with if it's already subdivided. You actually want to subdivide later. So let's do this in a very simple way, just so that we don't make ourselves a nightmare. I'm going to come into object mode, add a new cube, so that I've got no subdivision on that, because then you'll be able to make a lot more sense of when to bevel. If I've got it subdivided, sometimes the edge loops don't select nice and cleanly, then I've got to select every single edge. I just want to save a little bit of time right now. So try to save your subdividing for later. Try to work low poly to high poly if you can, unless you really have to do the reverse of that. So bevel. If I click on the button and I mouse wheel in or out, I can bevel this to my heart's content. And as you can see, it's very clean. This would have been a lot harder if I go back to the object that I had, because now if I select everything, it doesn't honor my edges. It's selecting every edge. So now you're going to see what an absolute mess this is going to become. Okay? But also, now with my faulty mouse, if I go to input, turn that off, so I've got my alt key back to choose an edge loop, I'm only getting that one loop of edges selected, whereas I'm trying to get it to select the whole gamut. So for instance, I'm going to have to shift alt all the way around and then do the same for all the other sides, and then I can go shift B and add in my bevel. So it's a little bit of a longer way around when you already got something subdivided. Let me just turn this back on so that I can move my viewport. Now, bridge edge loops. Bridge edge loops I've used once or twice. The best way for me to show you this one is, let's go to face mode number 3, duplicate that, grab it up on the Z, and then what we're going to do is select those below it and then bridge edge loops. And technically what should happen is that Blender figures out a way how to join those two separated areas of the mesh together. That's why you could think of the word bridge as building a bridge between those two separated groups of faces, edges, or vertices. Loop cut, by now most of you should know what the loop cut is. It's an incredibly useful tool for controlling the topology. Control R. I can now make sure that I'm going to get nice clean edges. And that when I go into matcap mode, oops, that was wrong. Escape, escape. Control R. Can be a little bit foibly, so be patient with yourself. You're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. Now, later on, when I render this into matcap mode, these edges are going to be very nice and sharp, especially if I add a subdivision modifier that's going to try to forcibly round this off. Loop cuts you're going to use many times as well is if you've got, let me just come out of edit mode and grab everything along the Y. Sometimes Blender does that. Grab along the Y and then deselect just out of safety, add cube, tab into that cube. Now loop cut is also nice when you want to go from low poly to high poly. So for instance, if I know Control R, mouse wheel, I already subdivide that a number of times, and click, and then escape to not move those edge loops. It's a little bit of a clunky way because you've got other things that can happen between them. So for instance, if I try to mouse move right now before I've clicked, you'll notice it's trying to find an alignment relative to the geometry that I'm using. Once I click, I can either drag it along for just one edge loop and I can mouse wheel up. No, not right now. So hold on a second. Let me do this again. Control R. Without moving it now, I can mouse wheel up or down to increase the number of edge loops. But you'll notice that you've got to be very careful about moving your mouse right now. So click, but now you'll notice that you can still move them side to side. So the best way to do that is to escape so that you stick to the original position that you had. This tool is powerful, but there's a bit of clunkiness in it that I have personally found, because you have to be aware on when to click and when to hit escape to keep those edge loops consistent. Now the next one is mark seam. Mark seam, the best way for me to show you this is, let me go back into turn off my emulate mouse button, considering I've got a faulty mouse. Alt, left click. So technically now that loop is connected all the way around, and I'm going to go back here and I'm going to mark the seam. Now you'll notice that it turns red. This is very useful specifically when you're working with character meshes and you want to do face sets and things like this. Mark seams is incredibly vital. I've only used clear sharp once or twice, so I'm not going to go into this right now, but this is kind of your more advanced modeling tools. Rip edge. Rip edge is basically when you want to separate these two into this object into two separate pieces. So let's go Alt V and see what happens. Now that's not totally clean. Let me try this with another example, just to give a nice fresh perspective. I'm going to choose another edge loop there, and then come to rip edge, but I'm going to move my mouse over the object, Alt V, and it's not quite doing what I was expecting. I was expecting it to actually rip itself separate. Okay, so I'm going to have to revisit that one in another tutorial because I think that one is a bit confusing for me. Subdividing and unsubdividing. The best way for me to show you this is, let's come out of here, select all GY, and then we're going to add a new box. Cube, tab into it, and now, yes, you can right-click S, right-click S, right-click S, or select everything and subdivide, 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 but now you've got the undo function to go the other way as well, which is quite useful. You don't have to worry about the shortcut keys. The shortcut keys are still there for you, but now you can just do it by clicking a button. Now the next is, let's get into the very simple functionality of extrude. I'm going to subdivide that up a bit more, so I've got a few more faces I can look at. And I'm going to go into face mode. I'm going to select these 4 faces. Just out of interest sake, let's do these 2. And I want to bind it to the Y plane, or the Y axis, and I can now extrude that out along the Y. I can also do the same thing for extrude vertices. So for instance, if I choose a vertice and I click extrude vertices, you'll notice it does something quite strange and not quite intuitive. It's only pulling out the vertices and none of the edges or faces follow. Then I'm going to go into edge mode and select those 2 edges just for an example and extrude edges along the Y, and you can see I'm now extruding only those edges, which brings a new face with it. That's a very simple example. Now extrude faces we've already done. If I select, let me just go back into face mode. I'm going to select that face there and that face there, extrude faces along the Y, and I can now modify those faces and it will build up any new faces relative to that extrude. Now the next tool is very useful specifically because it really helps you to do very fast edge loops. Let's say for instance I want to add a bit of topology, a fast and easy way. I select these faces on the top of this cube and inset faces, and then straight away I can inset some reinforcement lines so that my topology becomes nice and clean. But this is very useful for when you want to now extrude this out and you've got a smaller facet or smaller feature on an object. Sometimes what I'll do is I will inset once a little bit, inset again to the place that I want to start extruding, inset again just a little tiny bit. Now I want to extrude on that along the Z, and just a tiny little bit, because then that gives me the 3 edge loops that I need, or the 2 edge loops that I need, and then from there extrude along the Z, and I've now got all of the correct topology that I need, excluding obviously on this surface here. So what I'm going to now do, just to show you a quick example, to make this have some good topology, extrude along the Z, but just a tiny little bit, and then I'm going to come back to my inset faces just by hitting the I key and bring it in a tiny little amount. Now you can see between this surface here, this surface and this surface, we've got pretty good topology already, except for these edges, which I might have to do a bit of cleanup on later. Alright, I'm not going to get into Extrude Advanced because by now you should know how this works. This will also be for a more advanced introduction at some other stage. Full faces, let's say for instance I've got faces missing. So I'm going to delete these faces and I want to rebuild that, but I don't want to do it the clunky way. I want to do it a little bit of a faster way. I'm going to go into my edge tool. Let me just deselect because I see there's something selected in the background. I select the perimeter that I want to fill. Now there's many ways to skin a cat. I'm just showing you that this is one of many ways. And then I want to click on full faces. Now you're going to notice that sometimes you're going to get triangles. There's already triangles that we don't want. So let's just see if I undo that, and instead of using the button, I press the F key. The F key does it in a little bit of a cleaner way. So it's all going to be depending on which way you want to skin the cat. You can also use the same fill with grid. And if I undo it and I go Control F, I'm going to have to look for grid fill and it'll do the same thing. But the button is there to remind you of the shortcut key and to give you an explicit name that you can use. If it doesn't work in the end panel, just bring your mouse over the object and then hit the shortcut key. Right, now we're going on to the knife tool. Best way for me to show you the knife tool is to go into vertice mode, press K. I'm first going to deselect everything, press K, and then snap onto a vertice and draw between two vertices and press enter. Now that is an edge that's been added to this mesh. Sometimes this is useful for when you want to slice out a specific shape into an existing quad-based object. Just remember that later on you're going to want to do a mesh cleanup so that you don't have triangles messing up your model. Let me think of another way to show you this quickly. Let's say, for instance, you'll notice now that if I go into face mode, I can select those two separate faces and they are now triangles, and you ideally want to be modeling towards quads. Quads have got the best support inside of games, and they are a lot lighter on processing compared to triangles. Now the next one is rip vertices. Now I'm going to have to show you this in a bit of a different way. Let's go into vertice mode, select those vertices there, and press the V key. And what should happen is you can see it actually splits those vertices into two. This is very useful sometimes when you want to have a portion of your object separated off as another object. You're going to rip it off so that you can start treating that as a separate object. Like for instance, imagine for a second, let's just undo this. I want to test, yeah, okay, if this was a container and this section was a lid, and I wanted to continue modeling this but separate from the lower half, then what I might do is, it's a bit of a long way around, I hit my Alt key to select an edge loop. Let's see if the edge loop is selected. It is. And then I'm going to go back to rip vertices, but I'm going to rather use the shortcut key. Now, if I tap on any piece of that object, whether it be vertice, edge, or face, and then press L, I should only see the top half of that. Now with that selected, I hit P to separate it off. Now that is a separate lid, separate from this specific object. If I click on that object, it's not going to highlight this. So for instance, if I press L while selecting a face, you're going to notice it's excluding that. And this is very useful for when I want to start splitting off an object into various pieces that I can model separately. Let's get into the last couple of functions here before the close of this tutorial. Separate parts, we've just witnessed that now. I'm just going to undo this and show you. These two sections were one piece. I ripped those vertices to split them. So now when I select one part, I hit L, I can see that this selection of vertices, edges, and faces is separate from this one. If I want to now split that off as its own object, I click on Separate Parts by selection, and you're going to notice straight away it changes its color to a dark orange, which means that it's no longer part of this mesh. If I tab out, I can select between the two, and they are now completely distinct objects. Okay, so this tutorial is coming to a close. Let's go into edit mode. And split geometry I haven't used yet. I'm going to exclude on this one for now, just until I have a better handle on it. And then transform, shrink, or flatten. Basically, as you can see, it's going to kind of inflate it or deflate it, depending on what you want to do. Don't think of this as the same as scale, because as you can see, it's giving you a very different result. It's kind of like filling it with hot air, you could say. It really kind of over-exaggerates everything a little bit. But you're going to find a use for this probably mostly when you're working with characters or character meshes. Maybe a forearm is a little bit too thin and you want to fatten it up a little bit. Righto, so this gives you a very brief and very and a very surface introduction to some of the key functionality that's added into edit mode. Hope you found a little bit of use for this. Please remember to practice your tools. Even if you don't use the add-on, the most important thing with Blender is to grab yourself 5-minute practice sessions and to run through the tools and to get the tools second nature. But at least now you've got buttons to remind you what they do with the label and with the shortcut key. So your cognitive load should drastically reduce. Hope you found some usefulness out of this and see you guys in the next tutorial. Have a good day.